Hi everybody, Adam Levine here with Sky Insurance Brokers. Today we're going to be talking about what it means to live in a high fire area, what specifically the features are of homes that insurers are looking at that's going to determine, the higher rates being in the higher fire or the higher risk areas. We're going to look at a few homes today, a few properties. We're also going to take a look at some of the Caldor devastation since we're here in El Dorado County. First, I'd like to start with just even my house. You'll notice my house, if you pan around, is in a subdivision where every third or fourth house is pretty much the same. Due to the fact that it's in a subdivision, even though it's in a high fire county like El Dorado, we've got hydrants everywhere, as you can see over there. Pretty much 6 hydrants within 1,000 feet. That helps. The nearest fire station is just the other side of the freeway, so less than about a half a mile. One of the things that makes this house, or any of the homes in this neighborhood, a little bit less expensive to insure or easier to find a standard carrier is that it's considered hardened. For instance, if you take a look at my house, it's stucco, it's not wood. The roof is cement, it's not asphalt shingle. So in a very roundabout way, my house is kind of fireproof. There's no such thing as fireproof, but it's a lot more fire resistant than a standard home that's built on a crawl space, made of wood with a tar-like substance for the roof. So a neighborhood like this is going to be a lot easier to find a standard carrier that would probably take this home. I currently am with an admitted carrier, but if I was to leave that admitted carrier, I couldn't go back to them because they've reached a point of what we call saturation. They've got too many policies in this area, they won't take any new business. So my own neighbor across the street couldn't have the same carrier I have. So I need to stick with them as long as possible, because should I lose this carrier, all I'll have left as an option is probably the fair plan for 2-3 times as much. So anyways, I thought we'd start here, and we're gonna go on a little field trip today. Hope you stick with us. I wanted to, before we take this tour on a little further, wanted to remind you of the 3 very important scores in insurance. The first score is called Fireline score, also known as brush score. It's synonymous. Different carriers call it Fireline, others call it brush, but it means the same thing. It's determined by a company called ISO, the Insurance Service Organization, or office, I believe it is. They have their own dedicated satellite, and they're looking down on a property such as this one, and they are taking into consideration 3 factors. The first factor is the slope of the property. Notice the slope of this property. It's sloping up. It's not a flat, even property like we saw over at my neighborhood with the subdivision. It's also looking at the amount of vegetation that satellite sees, both brown and green, dead and alive, as you can see. It's a little bit brushy around here. Easy fuel to ignite. Finally, the last factor that they take into consideration is the ingress and egress. How easy is it for a fire truck to get up here and turn around and fight the fire, etc. As you probably just saw from that car trying to make its way through this tight curve here, this area right here, this street is wide enough, but getting up here, climbing up the top of the hill is a little bit of a task, and fire trucks have to go slower. Now, I just recently quoted a home right here on this street, and its Fireline score was a 9 out of a possible 30, okay? So that's pretty high. Carriers that are concerned with Fireline or brush score, they wanna see 2 and lower. Even though it goes up to 30, it's rare that we see anything really above a 17. The average in this area of Placerville is about a 6 or a 9. The second score that's most important is what we call wildfire score. It takes those same 3 factors that ISO did, but it also includes historical data for a period of time, I think 25 or 30 years. What's happened in this area in the last 25, 30 years. Not just fires, but has there been a lot of rain, a lot of mudslides? Has there been a year where we had a lot of claims for fallen trees? And then it uses predictive modeling for another fixed period of time, say the next 25 or 30 years, and it assigns a value from 1 to 100. This particular street, this particular home that I'd quoted on this street was a 54. That's in the middle, but very few carriers who write using that scoring aren't writing anything above a 40. And then finally we have the protection class, which is the nearest station being within 5 miles, and it's got to be a manned 24-hour station. Here in El Dorado County and other counties like Placer County and Nevada County, there is a lot of fire stations, but most of them are volunteer, meaning you have to wait for the staff to get there, spark up the trucks, get in their gear, and then get out to the property. That's time consuming. So what insurance carriers are concerned with are the manned 24-hour, 7-day-a-week fire stations, and also whether there's a fire hydrant within 1,000 feet. Now again, this particular street, we're in Placerville, in central downtown Placerville, actually up on the hill. You can see there's a fire hydrant right down there, the red hydrant, and Station 25 is about 1.25 miles away. Now you would think, okay, they can be here, I think, in 6 minutes, but it's a little bit more of a slower crawl because they do have to get up this winding road just to get to the top of the hill here to put out any potential fires on this street. And the problem is, as I've explained to my videographer here, fire goes uphill. Now I don't know if you've panned around yet, but maybe you want to pan around and look at that view right there. That's Placerville. That might be central Placerville down there, the stores and Main Street. But a lot of people who live in areas like this are living up on those hills. Fire goes up. That is very brushy. That's what the carriers see. They just see claims waiting to happen, fuel, potential fuel everywhere. So when you take a look at a house like mine that we started out at, the fire line score was a 2. The wildfire score was in the 70s because around my neighborhood there's a green belt. And the protection class was a 4. Those are considered lower numbers, easier for a standard carrier to possibly be interested in my home. Up here, unless somebody has been grandfathered in by their carrier that they've been with for 30 years, nothing up here is going to be eligible for anything except maybe the FAIR plan because of the difficulty getting up here, ingress and egress. That view alone, which is a lot of what people want. They come up here and they want to buy homes with this lovely view, but that's the killer. That's what's killing them, is views like that. As I said, the carriers see nothing but fuel. And yes, we have a hydrant here and the fire station is close by, but this is a pretty brushy area, and because of that, the scores are higher. As I said, in this area, this particular street, the house that I quoted on this street, was a fire line score of 9, a wildfire score of 50-something, and a protection class of 4. So this is more of the standard of what we see, what I deal with in the high fire division as what we call the difficult to place insurance, the stuff that doesn't meet the standards of most standard carriers. So these are the ones where I really have to jump through some hoops to find a carrier. If I can find one, I will, but if not, ultimately it ends up in the FAIR plan with some sort of wrapper, difference in conditions policy to make up the difference. So, shall we move on to the next place? We are in Majestic, Pollock Pines, California. This is a very hot area for buyers. They're looking to find a home that's away from the city, in the hills, in the forested areas. That's what they're looking for. You'll see in a few moments what kind of area it is. It's got a lot of trees around it, a lot of green. That's what has attracted the buyers to this area. And you have a standard home like this one. This one's selling, I'm not sure how much it's selling for, but it's got some very high scores. Although its brush score is only a 6, its wildfire score is an 87. That's very high. And even though there's a hydrant just down the street here in this cul-de-sac, the nearest manned 24-hour station is 6.5 miles away, which makes this a solid 10, which is the highest you can get in the protection class, but a 10W, meaning there is water available when the fire department eventually gets here 16 minutes later. But that means 16 minutes of a potential fire consuming this house before somebody's actually able to connect to a hose to it. So anyways, this is kind of the bread and butter of what we see in a lot of standard high fire homes. A regular middle class type of $400,000 to $500,000 home, about 18 to 2,200 square feet, built in the 70s, 80s, maybe even the 90s, with these kind of scores. High scores, high forested area equals high premium. The average premium I've been seeing in Pollock Pines, especially since the Caldor fire ripped through here last summer, is about $6,500 to $6,800 for a standard home. That's where we've gotten to now. And that's with only the California FAIR plan. That's the only carrier available. So hopefully this has given you a little illumination onto what it means to be looking for homes in the high fire areas, or what we call high fire areas. And I think that'll kind of conclude our little tour today of rural areas. And I think next we're going to go and take a look and see exactly what the Caldor fire did to help maybe improve your area. You obviously don't have control over your neighbors and the brush and the amount of trees your neighbor might have, but you can certainly do that with yourself. We pulled over here alongside a Sly Park Road to show you what this one particular homeowner has done to kind of mitigate the potential damage from fire on his property. Notice that he's dropped a bunch of trees, he's cleared it. Yes, there's a lot of pine needles on the ground, but the ground duff itself is gone. I'm not seeing a lot of brush here. He's cleared a nice little ring around the front of his property. He's limbed trees up, at least 6 feet up from the ground have been limbed, so that it makes it harder for lower brush or lower flames that are lower on the ground to reach the lower fan leaves of these trees. So this particular property has done a great job at mitigating the potential for fire and reaching his house. He's got grass around his house itself. That's going to be better, obviously, than the pine needles. But I remember this property just last summer. This was pretty bushy. You couldn't see the house from the road, and that's why I pulled over. I thought this was a good example of what to do to kind of mitigate your property and help keep the fire risk lower. This might not help this particular homeowner this year as far as his fire line or brush score, but next year at renewal, maybe he'll go down from a 6 to a 4, who knows? Every year the satellite passes over and it makes a new judgment call. So, hi everybody, thanks for coming with us on our field trip today, especially out in the rural areas. Today it was specifically El Dorado County, Placerville and the surrounding areas. But as you saw, there are a lot of factors involved that carriers look at when evaluating the rates for a home. Distance to the fire hydrants and stations, slope of the property. You got to see some properties with a lot of slope and vegetation. You got to see some areas like around my neighborhood that were just tract homes, but still expensive. Hopefully that answered some of your questions as far as why is insurance so expensive in these rural areas, but also maybe it gave you some ideas on how to maybe mitigate the premium for your property. As always, we're always here for you to give us a call. We can discuss how to maybe get your rates down and do a premium review of your policy, and also maybe the property. Maybe I have some ideas on how to get your brush scores down. But we're always here for you. Feel free to give us a call for a review or just to discuss your policy. Have a good day.